It's basically impossible to keep track of all of the NFL free agency moves that take place throughout an NFL offseason. You see the big ones. You see the big trades, the headliners, all across your timeline. But what about the smaller additions that could make a big difference? In this video, my favorite under the radar free agency signings from this offseason that I think could make a big impact in 2022. Before I give you my favorite under the radar signings from this NFL offseason, make sure that you do spike that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more BLV NFL free agency just like this. Also, spike that notification bell to be notified with the latest upload. Also, let me know in the comments what you think. What's your favorite under the radar move? All right, let's get started. Mike Hughes to the Detroit Lions. Mike Hughes has been one of my favorite under the radar, underrated corners of this past season and entering free agency. I've always loved him. I've always loved his skill set dating back to his draft year. He was the 18th graded cornerback this past year for Kansas City, really with a breakout season this past season. Started his most games of any year in his career this year, turning just 25 years old. He allowed a 59% completion percentage, only 7 yards per attempt this past year. He forced 4 forced fumbles this past season and showcased his physicality as a corner, showcased his press man ability in Kansas City's scheme. And for a very cheap 1-year deal for the Lions, he could actually end up being a starter at perimeter corner for the Detroit Lions. A young player with a ton of upside. This is a perfect move for a team like the Lions. Next up, we've got Austin Blythe, who in his past has been a very good, capable center wherever he has played, primarily with the Rams. 2018, 2020, graded very, very well by Pro Football Focus at the center position, primarily successful in zone blocking schemes. He can be a nice fit for the Seahawks offensive line. They needed to upgrade that offensive line. Blythe is a move that doesn't break the bank and could easily give you nice production at the center position. Another Seahawks move that I really like is Quentin Jefferson. Quentin Jefferson has played for the Seahawks before, but really had maybe his best season statistically in 2021 with the Las Vegas Raiders, playing under Gus Bradley with the Raiders. He produced 6 sacks. He had 21 run stops, and he had over 46 pressures with that defense, and was the primary standout interior defensive lineman of the Raiders. Now he comes back to Seattle playing just as a role player behind Shelby Harris, behind Poona Ford. He'll be disruptive in his limited action, and he'll definitely be able to get to the quarterback. I love that move for Seattle. Very inexpensive. Next, you've got Justin Coleman, a player that I always felt played his best football in Seattle, despite his time playing in the New England scheme a lot of his career, playing with the Patriots under Belichick, playing with the Dolphins under Flores, playing under Patricia, where he gained his big contract with the Lions. I always felt he was best with Carroll in Seattle. That's because he's very good in zone coverage. He's good at reading and reacting. In one season, 2017, with the Seahawks, he had 2 pick sixes. He also produced 1.5 sacks that year, and that kind of gained him a reputation as one of the best nickel corners in the NFL, getting that big contract from Detroit. He actually had a little bit of a bounce back this past year under Brian Flores, allowing a really solid 63.4 passer rating allowed in 2021, along with 2 picks. So Coleman has regained his form and is now joining a team that he's played with before, has familiarity with, and as you can see, I like this familiarity moves for Seattle that I do think give them a nice veteran presence both up front and in the secondary, and Coleman can certainly be their nickel corner for 2022. Next up, we've got Austin Johnson to the Chargers. I love Austin Johnson as a underrated football player. A lot of people are talking about Sebastian Joseph Day. As they should, he's a good player. He's familiar with Brandon Staley, all that stuff, but man, Austin Johnson is arguably better than Sebastian Joseph Day. And you're not going to hear Austin Johnson come up on ESPN. That's why you subscribe to the Bottom Line View, guys, because Austin Johnson, I could make a bold claim right here, could be better than Sebastian Joseph Day for the Chargers. Well, he was more productive this past year. 3.5 sacks in 2021. He's only 28 years old. He had 72 tackles. 72 tackles in 2021 and graded as the 57th best interior lineman this past year for the Giants, thriving off of Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams. Johnson stood out as a pass rusher and a run defender, and he's a player that, as he gets more reps, he has shined more and more and more. I wouldn't be surprised if he was their best interior defensive lineman in 2022. Great signing for the Chargers. Russell Gage to the Tampa Bay Bucks. You might have heard of this one just because the Bucks kind of tend to get the headlines with Tom Brady, who actually talked Russell Gage into coming to Tampa Bay. And no wonder. Chris Godwin thinks he's underrated. Mike Evans and Godwin have gone back and forth about how underrated Russell Gage is, and they are probably right. Back-to-back years with 700 yards. This past year, he actually stood out as the Atlanta go-to receiver when Calvin Ridley left with 66 catches and 4 touchdowns in 14 games for Matt Ryan. He's only 26, so he could potentially even be getting better. But as a number 3, number 4 option in the Bucs passing offense, he's going to thrive. And if he needs to come in for Chris Godwin, who's a bit beat up entering the season, or if anybody goes down for the Bucs receiving core, they're going to be in a much better position with Russell Gage there as their number 3 receiver than they were in the playoffs. So Russell Gage is the type of move that you need to make if you're a championship caliber team like the Bucs. The more receivers, the better. And he's somebody with versatility. Played 226 slot snaps where he's most comfortable, and then 339 out wide because when Ridley left, he had to take on a bigger role as an X receiver. So Gage is shown to do it all, and he's been productive doing it all. Next, you've got Bradley Bosman, the center of the Baltimore Ravens, going to the Carolina Panthers. I like this move a ton because Bosman in 2021 showed that he is a much better center than he is a guard, actually ranking and rating and grading as the 11th best center in football in 2021. He brings an old school grit, physicality, and power to the center position. I think Carolina with Austin Corbett and Bradley Bosman have done a great job of adding to this offensive line this offseason. Next, we've got Lorenzo Carter. Lorenzo Carter, I love. You guys know this. I kind of have a crush on this guy a little bit. I wanted him to play for New England for seasons, and now he's finally in a New England scheme with Dean Pease. He's got Dean Pease coaching him up, and I love Lorenzo Carter for his versatility. He's not the greatest pass rusher in the world, although he can produce. He was 60th in pressures for the edge position with 31 for the Giants. He did have 5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles this past year, but he's really good as like a hybrid edge, drop back in coverage type player where he was 7th graded in coverage. He did have an interception, so he's showcased that he can do a little bit of everything. Run defense with 20 stops in the run game. He can pass rush with those pressures and sacks, and he can drop back in coverage, showcasing his athleticism. He's got power, athleticism, size, everything that you want to see from an edge player in this system. 6'5", 255, perfect size, and he played 66% of the snaps. You're getting a 66% of the snaps player for a cheap contract. I think he could potentially thrive in this system being coached up by Dean Pease. So Lorenzo Carter back home where he played in college, Georgia, to the Atlanta Falcons. Next, you've got Anthony Everett of the Baltimore Ravens heading to the Raiders. I love this football player, and I love the fit in this scheme. Everett was really, really, really good for the Ravens last year, replacing Marcus Peters primarily for that secondary. 5'11", so he's got enough size to play against bigger receivers, but he can also run with faster receivers. He actually ran a 4.36, his 40 time. Impressive stuff for a corner on the perimeter. 27 years old, so he's just getting into his prime, and he really only got a chance to play this year because of the injuries. He's always been stuck deep on the depth chart and hasn't been able to get out of that like fourth cornerback spot for the Ravens. He's primarily a perimeter corner, but he produced when he was called upon. 3 interceptions, 11 passes defense. You've got 77.5 rating allowed, which is really impressive. And then only 55 completion percentage allowed. So that is a combination of talent, coaching. He played at Alabama. He played under Don Martindale. And now you have him in a scheme that loves to play man coverage. So it's going to be an easy transition for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually became the number 1 corner for the Raiders in 2022, assuming they don't sign somebody like Stephon Gilmore that is still left in free agency. I think he is that good and could develop into that type of player. He showed it in 2021. Next is Jayon Brown, who also went to the Raiders. I think Jayon Brown, I've always been a fan of his game. He's a very good coverage linebacker. He's had 2 seasons with 8 passes defense throughout his career. He's had a 6-sack season, which shows that he can be productive in the pass game as a blitzer, a rusher, or a coverage guy. He's really quick, athletic, fast, so he can stick with tight ends and even carry slot receivers down the field. He's got that type of athleticism. So at only 27 years old, yes, he's dealt with a couple seasons in a row with missing games and stuff like that, but if he stays on the field, he's going to be a really productive pass game player for the Raiders and complements what they already have at the linebacker position. He could end up being their best linebacker this year, and I wouldn't be surprised. Next is Duron Harmon. Duron Harmon is an awesome third safety. I still think he's a really productive third safety. The problem is he's been starting for the Lions and for the Falcons the last couple of years, and his grade and his ability has dipped because of that. But if you put him in a niche role like the deep free safety for your team as the third safety, the first guy off the bench, he is going to be really, really productive. And he's a ball hawk. He's extremely intelligent. He has familiarity with this system. He's a leader. He's been to like 4 Super Bowls and won 3, I think. He is a really good football player, a really smart football player, and somebody that's going to help your culture if you're a Raiders fan because of his championship experience. McDaniels values that with a Patriot guy coming to the Raiders. I think that Duron Harmon is going to be productive on and off the field for the Raiders. Next up, you've got Mr. DJ Jones, who is one of the best run defenders in football. This past year, he had the second most run stops in the NFL, only playing 50% of snaps for the 49ers. That's how good he is against the run. And he was the 18th graded interior defensive lineman according to Pro Football Focus in 2021. He doubled his career high in tackles this past season. And get this, for one of the best defensive lines in football, he's started every game since 2019. So that is a really good player, and I think he's been really underrated. So the Broncos, I know they got Gregory and Wilson, and everyone's going to talk about that. Jones is just as big of an ad for a team that struggled against the run last year. Next, we've got Kaiwan Williams, who also underrated a lot because of his position and because of the team he was on. He was on San Francisco, and a lot of times you weren't giving the attention to their corners because he was their best corner, and not a lot of attention went there because of their defensive line and their linebackers and stuff, but Williams has been extremely valuable for his versatility. He's good in zone coverage, but he's also good at like blitzing, tackling, playing the run. He's a highly versatile and effective football player. And in that nickel role, he can play in a variety of ways and do a variety of things. And I think for the Broncos, he's a perfect scheme fit. This past season, he had the second most tackles of his career, which shows he's still got that physicality, even getting a little bit older now, and I think can still play with the best of them at the nickel position, a position that's extremely underrated but extremely valuable. The Broncos went with Kaiwan Williams, and I think it will pay off for them. Next, you've got Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper could be one of the biggest tight end moves of this offseason. Austin Hooper is still a really good football player. I don't think he was properly utilized for the Browns. You know, last year, 345 yards, 3 touchdowns, 38 catches. I get he's not the most athletic specimen in the world, but he's a refined route runner. He's a great possession player. He's good in the red zone. He can block a little bit. Hooper is going to be nice for the Titans as the third option in the passing game. A guy that can be productive on third down, is a good possession receiver, can move the chains, and can score touchdowns. He had back-to-back 70-yard catch seasons with Atlanta earlier in his career, and you could see a resurgence in Tennessee as that third option, as I suggested, behind A.J. Brown and Robert Woods. So I like that move a ton as a one-year, $6 million type deal. Then you've got Kazir White of the Chargers going to the Eagles. This actually just happened. I think this is a great move because the Eagles have needed linebacker athleticism for quite some time, and White can fly. He can really fly. He had 2 interceptions this past year, 144 tackles. He's pretty vicious and all over the field, and you'll certainly notice him at the second level, and he just makes them faster at the linebacker level. He makes them more athletic. He makes them better in coverage. I think that's the perfect type of ad for not a ton of money that the Eagles made here at the linebacker position. A bad position for them, but he fits their system perfectly. He's a little bit smaller, but it doesn't really matter when you got Hargrave and Cox in front of you who are taking up all that space, where White can just make plays behind them. Next up is Ted Karras to the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm a huge fan of Ted Karras because he's versatile, he's tough, he's old school. He looks like he's straight out of 1972 as an offensive lineman, but he's good at guard, he's good at center, he's been productive at both. He's been a top 20 graded player in 19, 20, and 2021, and he was the 7th highest graded pass blocker at guard this past year. But he can play center, which is probably where he's going to play for Joe Burrow. So you get a good pass-blocking offensive lineman to protect Joe Burrow. Absolutely perfect signing. And it didn't even cost them a ton of money either. So that is awesome. Next, you got Morgan Moses, who's just a solid starting right tackle. And that's going to be so good and so amazing for Lamar Jackson, who had to deal with Villanueva last year, who couldn't even block his shadow. Morgan Moses is good in the run game, good in the pass game. Actually was a top 20 tackle in 2020, a little bit of a dip in 2021, but still very solid and across the board consistent and always there and healthy. So those are huge things for the Ravens for sure. Then we've got Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin, man, I'm a huge fan of his game. Only 26 years old, showcased that he can be a starting tight end in the NFL, and is probably going to play a lot in line, where he played 796 snaps for the Vikings. CJ Uzoma can be that slot guy, that move guy, and Tyler Conklin can be the inline guy to do a little bit of the dirty work. But last year, 61 catches. He had a lot of games, 9 games with 4+ catches. So Conklin has provided some pretty consistent production from the tight end position already, and has showcased that he can be a starter. Now you combine him with another nice threat at the position, and you're working with something pretty special there with the Jets. Then you've got Alec Ingold, who is an interesting addition. I think this is definitely an under-the-radar move because he's now the second highest paid fullback in the NFL, only behind Kyle Juszczyk. So they're going to ask him to do in Mike McDaniel's offense something that he hasn't really done with the Raiders, but when he's done it, he's shown that he can do it, if that makes sense. He's got athleticism. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. He can block. He can do a little bit of everything. They're going to use him to add more to their base personnel, to be a productive fullback in a variety of ways, and I'm very intrigued to see how he's utilized in this offense in Miami. Then we've got Raheem Mostert, who also is going to the Dolphins. He's just an explosive home run hitter, and if he stays healthy, we know he can be one of the most dangerous runners in the NFL. Raheem Mostert is absolutely special with his speed and can produce big plays for this Dolphins offense. Sticking with the AFC East, Roger Saffold could be a low-key move that has big payoff for the Bills' running game, an area that they definitely wanted to improve. They get a Pro Bowler from a year ago for the Titans, who opened up holes for Derrick Henry the last couple of years. Roger Saffold is just a pro's pro, 6 straight seasons of 15 or 16 games played. Really good football player that didn't cost the Bills a ton and has been one of the best players at his position for the last few seasons. Again, with the Buffalo Bills, Jameson Crowder, another pro's pro here. Jameson Crowder's going to replace Cole Beasley. He's going to add more speed, more vertical ability from that slot position. And when he stayed healthy, which has been a problem for him, he played 12 games in both the past 2 seasons. he can produce 50 catches in those 12-game seasons back-to-back, even with the Jets. So he was really their go-to guy a lot of the time, which just speaks to the Jets receiving core, but also as a third or fourth option for the Bills, he's going to be awesome. So I love that replacement, much cheaper than the alternative Cole Beasley, and also probably at this point more explosive. So I like that addition for the Bills. And the Bills also went with somebody familiar, kind of like Seattle. Jordan Phillips has been really good with the Bills. He actually got signed to a pretty big contract with the Cardinals because of his 9.5 sacks in 2019. His final season in Buffalo, 5 sacks in his last 2 years. That's 18 games that he played, so that was part of the reason he was let go. But back in Buffalo with Von Miller there, he's going to be able to thrive. And Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, they know how to utilize him to get pressure on the quarterback. So I think that's an awesome addition beside Ed Oliver. I think that's going to be low-key really, really productive and really awesome for the Bills. And the final move, low-key, under-the-radar move that I love is Ryan Bates to the Bears. Now, this is a former Bill. Had started 4 games with Buffalo last year. In all 4 of those games, he was really good. And he was actually signed to an offer sheet. I think he could become a starting guard for the Chicago Bears. A lot of teams were interested in him because of his limited sample size and high potential. I think that Ryan Bates could be a good starting guard for Justin Fields and that offense moving forward. Love that move because it didn't cost them a ton and it might really pay off. So those are your under the radar free agency signings of this 2022 NFL offseason and free agency that I absolutely love. Let me know your favorite move in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's Mitch. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.